Greetings and salutations.
Hello.
To the viewers. It's a great event, great joy for AIOCS. Uh, Most of you, of course, you know Wagdy and me. Um, we had a few conversations before around the personality, the legacy of Father Matta Al-Miskin, but now we have a long us guest. But I'll allow Wagdy to introduce our guest more in detail. Now, let me just share with you um, the reasons behind this happy moment. But not before I share something else. It's with great joy and pride that I introduce the cover of the
You didn't tell me you were
forthcoming.
gonna you didn't tell me you were gonna do that.
Why should I ruin the surprise? Yes, uh, Dr. Wagdy Samir uh, has his first book of theology published, and it'll be out hopefully very soon. This is the official cover from Braille, a very prestigious publisher in Europe, that part of the world where positive things still happen. And this is a book that it's been a long time coming. Wagdy, do you want to share anything about your book with the viewers? Just
I mean,
sort of warm us up.
it's based on my dissertation where Father Doru was my supervisor, and I did it over part-time, 5.5 years part-time, and to be honest, and not to embarrass Father Doru, without his guidance, this would have never happened
Okay, so
because.
let's stop sharing and let's stop talking. But look, congratulations. This is great, and it'll be a momentous publication, drawing um parallels between Father Matta and especially St. Cyril of Alexandria. It's a tremendous project. I'm sharing this with the viewers as an insider. Um, I mean, the idea behind this book is tremendous. Comparing the respective commentaries on the Gospel of St. John by St. Cyril and Father Matta, um, with a view to bring into light the doctrine of sanctification, holiness, divine participation. And I thought it'd be good to share this with the viewers, given that our topic tonight
Correct.
actually has a lot to do with Father Matta.
Yeah, it's a very much of a continuation, really, so that's nice.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify why Ramsey is with us. Um, on the website, perhaps people already noticed there's this button here, the AIOCS 2024 Beginnings Prize was just awarded at the time. Yeah. And you can find information about that one and whatever we are preparing for this year, offering another prize. But the winner of the prize is with us. And it's my pleasure, my joy to see again Ramsey after some time and
Likewise.
to congratulate you, my friend, for this prize.
I appreciate all
Wagdy.
your support. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Father Dora. So, as Father Dora said, Ramsey Andrews is with us. So, Ramsey is a fellow Coptic Egyptian Orthodox like myself. And basically, his master's thesis was on deification, but within the context of the Coptic Orthodox Church. And he also looked at Father Matta and Miskin, and sort of talked about the dialogue that was happening at the time that he was alive. And Father Matta and Miskin was a modern church father or desert father that was born in 1919 and departed to the Lord in 2006. So at the age of about 87, and 58 years out of those years, he was a monk, spent a lot of time in solitude, but he also published 181 books and booklets. Some of them are massive, massive documents, including commentaries on many books in the New Testament, but also some seminal works on baptism, Eucharist, on St. Athanasius, on monasticism. Really amazing sort of work. Ramsey chose to write about deification, participation in the divine, all of that sort of this concept. So the idea today, as Father Doru said, is Ramsey won a prize, and AIOCS will publish his work in the upcoming few months. And this is just like a teaser of what he's written. So the way we're going to run this session, and we'll try and be as quick as we possibly can, 3 sections. The first one is basically getting Ramsey to give a background of what brought him into this topic, especially within the context of obviously the Egyptian church, the Coptic Orthodox Church. That should be a short session, followed by a segment, which is probably where the guts of it would be, talking about his work. So what are the main points? What did he find? What are the discontinuities or misunderstanding, if at all, within the Coptic Orthodox Church, and why? And he brings into a richness of the Copto-Arab. So that's like what the Copts call the golden era in the Coptic Orthodox Church. He brings that into the dialogue, into the conversation. So he'll talk about these, and then we're finally going to go into very briefly, where does he think we should go from here? So the future direction. So background, content of his work, and then future direction. Father Doru and I will sort of interact with Ramsey. Most of the chat will be by him, and we might interject here and there to ask a few questions. I'm going to take some notes to sort of remind me so I don't cut him off, and then go back to a question. Is that good? Anything else, Ramsey or Father Doru? Maybe, Ramsey, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself before you delve into your background and where you come from and all that sort of stuff, and then the background of the work, like why did you choose this topic? What does it mean, and what brought you into it?
Yeah, so I was a student of theology a few years ago, where I completed my master's, and I was very much interested in the early church fathers and theology, and that was the discipline, I guess, that I chose to, even though I don't like to look at, and many of us don't like to look at theology as split up into different subjects, but when I was choosing my master's research, this wasn't the first topic that came to mind. I was thinking of doing, something on one of the church fathers, but then it occurred to me that there was an issue that has always been in the back of my mind within the Coptic Orthodox Church, which was a disagreement between Pope Shenouda III and Father Matta Miskin and their disciples, if you want to call it that. But it just sort of occurred to me, and I thought, okay, it'd be nice to do some research on that, because no research had ever been done on that topic before. If you go onto Google, you'll find lots of different posts and different opinions about this sort of topic, and the political variance which influenced the whole disagreement. Some of the disagreements were, and it's still till this day, can be quite nasty. So I thought to myself, since I'm quite disheartened by this whole dilemma within our church, why not do some research and formalize it and get some answers to some important questions? That's a little bit about my background leading into choosing to do this research.
Wagdy, you have to unmute yourself.
that will help. Any extra pointers on how did you get started? So before getting into the depth of what you did, like where did you start? I mean, did you start with reading maybe a bit of a quick introduction to the listeners? So Pope Shenouda the third was our 118th
117th
Patriarch of Alexandria.
Yeah.
And he reigned over the Coptic Orthodox Church for about 41, 42 years. And he was being prolific writer in terms of the popular press, like writing a huge amount. He had every Wednesday a conversation with people and whatever. It was really, really, really well liked. But he had a different view, and that's what I'm not gonna spoil it. No, I'll let Ramsey, but I just wanted to give the background to listeners who don't know. And he passed away in 2011, 12.
Yeah, I think it was right about 2011 or 2012.
About 5-6 years after Father Matta passed away.
Yeah,
okay. So back to the question. The question is, how did you enter that sort of thing? Like, did you read first about the topic outside and the church fathers and Eastern Orthodox, and then
where it all started was well before I was interested in formally studying theology. I was in my teenage years, and being in the church, it depends on what parish you were attending here in Sydney, but certainly in the parish, the couple of parishes that I attended here in Sydney, we were consistently told by various people not to read Father Matta Al-Miskin. A lot of his books were banned in Egypt by the Coptic Papal Authority. And that was certainly the view. There was a very strong view against Father Matta Al-Miskin. And what I found in my experience, I don't know how true this is, but in my experience, I certainly felt that there was rarely people that were in between. It was the majority of people were either very much against Father Matta, or there were people that absolutely loved him and loved to read his books, but we were told by a lot of people not to read his books because of the heretical ideas that were in them. And at that time, I hadn't read anything. I hadn't even read much of Pope Shenouda or anyone else. And so I was a little bit confused by that. And I was a little bit baffled that, such an important figure within our church. And just for a bit of context, Father Matta was at some point early on in Pope Shenouda's monastic career or his life, he was actually Pope Shenouda's mentor for some years. And when I'd come across pieces of information like that, it sort of got me curious about was that just a theological difference or differences? There must have been political differences. And so I spoke to various people about that. And then in the age of the internet, I would, go online and find out from different forums various things. But there was always two sides of the story, and it was always very confusing as to who to believe. And, certain people would say things like Father Matta was a disobedient. Other people would say he was very obedient and give examples of that. So that's where it all started. And even at that point, I wasn't interested in formally studying theology. I attended a book club for many years from the age of about 30 till probably more recent years, like about 5 to 10 years ago. And this book club, in this book club, we'd read lots of Eastern Orthodox writings. We'd read lots of Coptic early church fathers. And that's when I really got interested in studying theology. And then when it came time to do my research essay, it was just a light bulb moment. And I thought, okay, I want to get to the bottom of this and find out what's going on here so that the research can possibly give answers as to how to move forward and how to understand this conflict in a way where you don't have to be so disheartened about the future of the church, and there may be possible solutions as to some dialogue possibly in the future that might be beneficial for both sides of the debate.
Okay, that's good. So unless Father Doru, any comments before we delve into the actual work?
If I may, yes, thank you. Look, thank you for sharing, Ramsey. It's a situation that is encountered in many other places, including in my own church, so Romanian Orthodox for the record, and other churches of Byzantine tradition, where you have this kind of polarization, which to an extent makes sense, but only to an extent. We all know that people who don't have a solid grounding in, let's call it theological education, some theological insight, can easily be deceived by all sorts of ideas. Is this still a time, an age when we can simply say to people, well, don't read that because it's heretical? I think it's utopian, let alone pastorally damaging to an extent, because people somehow have to face difficulties in order to grow up in the understanding of their faith. But yes, if there's a support group where even, let's call them dangerous ideas, can be discussed and tackled seriously, that's another story. I think that's where many Orthodox churches across the spectrum don't have. They still go with the narrative either or, as you said earlier. On the other hand, yes, I think your personal trajectory is very interesting. It shows how you went from a, let's say, personal interest, let's call it popular level interest in this topic and the broader theological context to undertaking a theological education. You got a degree and then research. And I think, again, the churches should understand that without research and without encouraging research into even thorny topics such as this one, who will suffer ultimately are still the grassroots. Because in the absence of an informed opinion, which cannot be obtained without research, nothing can be done. No guidance can be offered. We can simply impose on people our views, but our views would be based on what? Authority. Well, we live in a strange time when authority is contested on so many levels. So the way ahead, yes, it's that of research, and then after getting via research certain conclusions, then those conclusions should be put forward for a more public discussion.
That's correct. That's nice. That's very true. Hopefully this will get better with time. Okay, so let's just delve into your work. So rather than sort of asking individual questions and waiting for you to answer and all that sort of stuff, just the idea here is you want to sort of get the readers who obviously have not read your work till it gets published by AIOCS Press, give them a feel of what the main topic is, what are the main tenets of that topic, any sort of things that you've discovered as you sort of went through the research, hypotheses, how did you prove them, and all that stuff in your own words, and obviously not in extreme detail, but just say over 10 minutes or something, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do my best to kind of give as quick a summary, an adequate a summary as possible. But obviously, Wagdy, you've read my work, so if you feel that I've missed anything, just jump in and kind of let me know, and I'll cover that particular aspect of it.
Cool.
So the work pretty much aims to shed light on this debate within the church, this debate that began as a disagreement between Pope Shenouda III and Father Matta Al-Miskin. And it makes it, the work makes it clear at the outset that we're not going to be delving into, because of the limited scope of the work, we're not going to be delving into the political aspects or any other aspects. The only real aspect that we're going to look at is the theological differences, and to try to iron out or sort those issues out. And one thing that's very, very clear that comes to light within a couple of chapters of the work is that there is a clear misunderstanding, and that's very easy to pick up on. There's a very clear misunderstanding of Father Matta's notion of deification. And where it's most clear is in a particular book that Pope Shenouda wrote in Arabic, or the direct translation in Arabic is New Heresies. And there's a section of that book where he talks about Father Matta, Al-Miskin, and his disciples without mentioning them by name. And he, when talking about or introducing the idea that it's a heretical notion, is he makes a very bold statement that no church father has ever condoned the idea of deification. So straight away, we know that there is a huge discrepancy there. And but when we start to look into the Copto-Arab history and the golden period of the Copto-Arab age, we'll also start to see the reasons possibly why Pope Shenouda has that view. So it seems quite ignorant at the beginning, but then when you have a look at the history, ignoring the Greek, reading the Greek, early church fathers in Greek, and when you're looking at the Arabic translation, it starts to make a little bit more sense as to why Pope Shenouda would have this, can make this bold statement, and in his mind would genuinely believe that. And one example of that this work touches on is that, for instance, in that golden age which was around about the 13th century, to put it into context, during that golden age period, there was a writer who was Coptic and Arabic, and he was in his translation of Saint Athanasius's famous dictum, "God became man so that man might become God." There was a scholar who points out that, and it's been picked up by quite a few scholars, that phrase, the way that phrase was interpreted in the context of Islamic Egypt, because the Coptic people at the time were very much like a lot of the people there were apologists, at the time, and trying to survive in an Islamic society, trying to conduct dialogue, like very well-learned people would have dialogue with well-learned Muslims, and they would try to not just survive but to thrive as a church as well within that Islamic context. And so the idea here is that when it was translated into Arabic, it would have made more sense to some people, at least, to translate that dictum as one that only applies to the person of Christ, but not to humanity by extension. And so when God becomes man so that man might become God, man here is, or the human being here is Christ, the human being, not all of us by extension, which doesn't make a lot of sense when you have a look, when you have read Saint Athanasius and Saint Cyril and the Alexandrian fathers and many of the other early church fathers. So without that context and with that kind of theological perspective, and there are obviously issues there with understanding concepts like the incarnation and salvation, and so many other concepts veer away from the traditional view that a lot of the early church fathers had. So
maybe just a quick question, sorry for an interruption. Do you recall the name of the Copto-Arab church father?
So it was from memory.
Bulus al-Bushi, was it?
No, it wasn't Bulus al-Bushi. I think he came. I think he was during the Copto-Arab period, but it was. It's a hard name to pronounce, but there were many of them. But that particular instance, I've got to go back to the work, and his name's on the tip of my tongue, but I just, yeah.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So a lot of these ideas are it's deeper than just the topic of deification. A lot of these ideas don't gel well with Islamic theology. So a lot of the theology was adapted to match that of similar kind of notions about God in Islam, in order to be able to even have a dialogue with Islamic theologians in the first place. So that's my understanding of the background there and why Pope Shenouda, is able to say make quite a bold statement like that. So that's one thing, is that we are quite clear, without obviously putting any blame on anyone. I personally believe that Pope Shenouda was a great pastor and a great shepherd to his flock in many ways. But if we're going to be objective, then obviously knowing Athanasius and Cyril and what they said, it's crystal clear. This is not a compatible statement with their teachings on deification.
Yeah, so actually, this is one of those cases where, bringing the topic back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, how important it is for the churches to sponsor theological research, because in the absence of, first of all, first-hand documents, not mistranslations or later reinterpretations in so very different contexts, and without undertaking the right analysis of those works in terms of what they mean originally, of course, we can just go blindly and make assumptions that don't hold water. This is one such case, and I think you managed to portray so well the quality of Father Matta's undertaking, who actually dare to learn Greek and to read the Church Fathers in the language of Alexandria, the Alexandrian Greek, and so get a better sense, a better grasp of how soteriological topics, so matters of salvation, were dealt with by giants such as Saint Athanasius or Cyril.
Yeah. So, to be sympathetic towards Pope Shenouda's view, I guess some people might argue that that was necessary for the survival of the Coptic Church within Egypt. But then there are other arguments that say that it wasn't necessary because other churches still thrived in hostile environments as well. So there's always going to be, I guess, different opinions on those things. So the study isn't just one-sided, and it looks at advantages and disadvantages to both sides, and I guess both points of view can be said to serve their own function in different contexts. And it definitely doesn't look at one side as being right and one being wrong. It looks more at the context and provides a sympathetic view towards each side. But for somebody who's reading this paper, they will obviously see that making black and white instructions, such as not to read Father Matta's books or anything like that, is not warranted. So I think that's something that's very clear, that's established, in this paper. In terms of, so the paper, goes through the Copto-Arab context of things. It also has a look at, so I forgot to mention that early on, it does compare Father Matta's work to the early church fathers, especially Athanasius and Cyril, the Alexandrian fathers, since the Coptic Church aims to have an Alexandrian heritage, but there's that can be said true of so many other churches as well. But I specifically had a look at these early church fathers because they were very early on and they addressed this topic of deification quite extensively. And in short, Father Matta's view of deification, although is not exactly the same as Athanasius and Cyril, but the consensus, I guess, is that his views still fall within the orthodox bounds of deification, and he's not so far off or anything like that. In terms of a takeaway, one of the most important takeaways I feel people can get from this paper is that, and I got this from, I got this concept from, I think it was one of your courses, Father Doru, is the, if I remember correctly, it was the Mosaic theological method and plurivocal orthodoxy, which is this.
Yeah, I think plurivocal. I use that. I noticed how prominent this concept is in your work, and I was glad that I made a dent. But I do believe that, and thank you for bringing this up. I do believe that this is actually the case all across the spectrum of orthodoxy. Yeah? We all tend to do this kind of leveling. We take orthodoxy as uniformity instead of plurivocal unity, and I noticed how strong this concept is in your book. Can you say something about it, please?
Yeah, it is definitely a concept that resonates a lot with me and has resonated throughout my theological studies well before I even embarked on this topic. And Stanley Harakas, who's an academic theologian, mentions the concept of a mosaic theological method, where he talks about this grand mosaic, and there are adjoining pieces, small tiles or pieces to this big mosaic that gives you a big picture, but every single tile has its own complete painting, if you like. And so when you put all of them next to each other, you can't reduce it to one little individual tile, although they're completely different. One tile to the next is completely different. And so I think that this somewhat applies to this topic and the theological differences here. I think too often we dogmatize things, probably in other churches, but certainly in the Coptic Orthodox Church. And I think we need to zoom out, a little bit, and have a look at the grand mosaic and have respect for one another's opinions, because I think it all forms a little part of the overall picture. Would you agree, Father Doru, Wagdy?
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe just because of conscious of time, we've got 15 minutes, and I don't want the listeners to miss, I think, an important point. How would you summarize Father Matta's deification concept? If you sort of to provide a couple of sentences, or what would that be?
I think if I was to summarize it, it will sound very much like St. Cyril's theology on deification, which is participation in the divine. And I think that's the key word. It's not that we become gods, but we are the ones who participate, and God is the one who is participated in. So, and Father Matta is really big on linking the concept of deification with the sacraments. So that's the key point, I think. So when you have a look at Pope Shenouda's view, which is where he states that those who believe in the idea of deification are going down the rabbit hole of pride without realizing that they are. I think that if you talk about deification, Father Matta's deification, which is very clear in his writings that we are to participate in God, I think that rules that kind of statement out, that the idea of deification is a prideful exercise. So
I think, you were, I think, very aptly introducing some caveats there, that you won't be dealing with the politics around the whole thing, and the broader, how do you call it, broader landscape, and this explains what might have Okay, so the idea is some other considerations must have played or sort of decided the rules of engagement, and you are right to point out that we cannot simply point fingers one way. Especially pastoral and political considerations are so important in this case, especially in this case. But yeah, I think I found it fascinating in your book the fact that you managed to show with so much clarity that regardless of how unfamiliar the vocabulary of deification might be in modern Coptic contexts, Father Matta managed to uh, draw on the most legitimate sources of the Alexandrian tradition, like giants such as Saint Athanasius, Saint Cyril of Alexandria, and the topic of participation, and as Wagdy pointed out earlier, sacramental participation is so important in the Alexandrians that one wonders how can one fail to see um, the fact that Father Matta's sacramental doctrine of deification is pretty much along the lines of those early Alexandrians, and that's, by the way, incidentally, that's also the topic of Wagdy's own book. Yeah, so very important stuff. You know, there's an aspect that I think shouldn't be downplayed in terms of your contributions, Ramsey. And I think it's this pastoral approach. You are very gentle, you know. So on the one hand, there's this um, rigorous research you undertake. On the other hand, there's this not care not to upset people, but care to be useful to people. And I think this is the best we can expect from theological research, you know, this point about working on something, digging up a topic in order to get to something that is useful to the church, useful to God's people, and you do it, and it's such a joy to see this kind of discourse.
Thanks, Father. I appreciate it. Yeah, look, I think I was thinking about doing some other topics potentially, and I thought, how useful could this be, or what use is this going to have? And that's what probably got me thinking about this topic. Immediately came to mind because it's one that not only would I enjoy researching and doing, but I would have more answers in my own mind as to how to digest this information that's quite disheartening, like I said before. And it certainly helped me to come up with not complete closure, but has helped me to get some closure, and has helped me to look at this with much more openness. So,
Okay, so well, on this note, I think it's important to return to Wagdy's third question, you know, ramifications, learnings. What do we take away from this research?
Really sorry. I think I need a new PC.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the in terms of the future research question, look, I think the degree of compatibility between Father Matta's theology of deification and Pope Shenouda's theological expression of union with God, that's not something that I've looked at because I haven't discussed any of Pope Shenouda's writings on his concept of union with God. And there are writings where he discusses that concept, and it would be really interesting to find out are there, what the correlation, are there any correlations between the two? Um, are there any strong sort of similarities between those two, so that we can bring them together and maybe start some kind of a helpful dialogue between those two camps, if you like, uh, of people within the Coptic Orthodox circles and the Coptic Orthodox Church, which I think it would be nice to see um, some of the future research, look at that. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I was thinking about, which I think maybe you, I can't remember who suggested it, whether it was you, Father Doru, or someone else, is the um, looking at the idea, the term for deification in Arabic is called ta'Allah, right? That's the actual name of the term in Arabic. So I'd like to have a look, or I'd like someone to have a look at how that term was used, not just in Islamic theology, but also in Christian theology, and around that time during the Golden Coptic Arab period. And I think when we have more of an understanding of how that term was used in Arabic, that might shed some kind of light and help to have these discussions. I think it can probably also feed into the first point that I mentioned about having a look at the similarity between Pope Shenouda and his view of union with God, and Father Matta's concept of deification.
Wagdy?
Yeah, just interested to ask, maybe it's a question for you, Father Doru. Are you aware of any non-Orthodox scholars or whatever, like, for example, Protestants, who have had a journey as well, where they didn't really believe in that concept of deification and then changed their mind, or something like this?
Well, look, that's not quite my area, honestly. But in the past, when I worked in Bucharest in the university in systematic theology, we engaged all sorts of other Christian traditions, especially Western traditions. And I remember organizing a few years in a row some special seminars with a Swiss Reformed theologian who was a visiting professor in our department. And I learned a lot. So apparently the classical reformers like Zwingli, Luther, even Calvin, they all were aware of the doctrine of deification, especially via the works of St. John Chrysostom, who isn't one of the most, I don't know, prominent advocates, of that topic. Still, they learned something via Chrysostom doctrine or teaching, if you like. They learned something about this concept. And the idea is that the concept of deification wasn't strange to them. In other words, everyone who would undertake some study of the early church fathers would discover it in one form or other. This brings back the topic that you, Ramsey and Wagdy, you both address in your respective books. We have to dig up this tradition and find out those sources of the tradition, which of course cannot be dissociated from the history of God's people in 2000 years of Christian history. Yeah, there were so many different circumstances and challenges faced by God's people, and of course the responses were, as Ramsey already pointed out, somehow to accommodate Christian views and those of a context that was more or less oppressive. To what extent choices of the past make sense to us today is, I think, of little relevance. What we need to do is learn to appreciate even those redevelopments or revampings of the early Christian tradition in context where theological education is scarce, and when what's at stake is actually the existential, interest of a church to survive and eventually thrive, despite very dire circumstances. So I'm no expert there, and I know more recently there was a lot of interest in deification in Lutheran theology, especially in Finland, because Finland has two major churches, the Lutheran Church and the Orthodox Church. There's a lot of dialogue happening there, and with very interesting results.
That's interesting. That's good. Well, we're approaching at the end of the conversation. So just before we end, I'd like to obviously thank Ramsey for your work, for your interest, for being with us today in one of our sessions on AIOCS. As always, thank you very much, Father Doru, for being part of the conversation. And I have read Ramsey's work, and one of the strikingly nice thing about it, and which he alluded to, is the fact that despite the sort of controversies and all that sort of stuff, he tried to find a lens that finds a commonality and why everyone looks at it in a different way. And hence the next chapter eventually, in terms of further work, as he suggests, is looking at union with God and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully that broadens the picture even more to people on both camps. I really highly recommend that once the book gets published on AIOCS for people to sort of have a look, especially people from my tradition, like Ramsey and my tradition, now Coptic Orthodox, and to sort of really open their mind to sort of see with no prejudice against anyone that fundamentally there was a misunderstanding. And I know that there's a cultural issues, there's a political issues, there are conceptual issues, but really the theology is actually pretty simpler than what it portrays. So thank you very much, Ramsey. Thank you very much, Father Doru.
And you, and once again, congratulations, Ramsey. Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Father.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks very much.